Wolli Creek is the largest tributary of the Cooks River. It runs from Beverly Hills into Cooks River at Tempe, and in the last 5 kilometres closest to Tempe contains the last 56 hectares of bushland in the whole region. We are approaching Wolli Creek. We're a very short walk from the Turrella railway station. Directly in front of me we have the footbridge over the Wolli Creek. And further ahead, showing up as a very high hill, is one of the dominant features of the Wolli Creek Valley. It is known as Nanny Goat Hill because many, many years ago wild goats grazed upon that hill. At this point we first reach the creek. On this side we have the fresh water flowing down Wolli Creek. To the right and largely to the left you are seeing what are basically weeds. Those on the right are willows. To the left you see the coral tree with its red flowers. It too is a weed. We hope that one day we can have all of these weed trees replaced with trees more natural to the area. In fact, trees native to the area. On this side of the bridge we have the salt water, which flows back from Cooks River and leaves us with a tidal area. This is a large white egret. It is fishing in this creek. Obviously, in this tidal salt water side, there are fish which provide a very, very good meal and living for the many water birds. At this point, I'm standing on the weir. Once again, behind me we have the fresh water, in front of me the salt water. Under normal circumstances, the water flows through these 3 pipes to maintain the level of water here on the freshwater side. But when we get heavy rains, this weir is totally flooded to a depth of over 2 metres. And in fact, the bridge regularly goes underwater, resulting in a 3-metre high wall of water flowing down through the saltwater area and on to Cooks River and Botany Bay. Over here we have a natural pond area. In this pond, the water level varies according to the level of water in the creek system. Once again, we have a lot of weed growth insofar as we have willows, we have flame trees. But in the pond itself, we also have large numbers of water weeds. But also you can see a fringe of reeds starting to come back and colonise the area. As we leave the pond area, we start heading up in the direction of Nanny Goat Hill. Nanny Goat Hill, as I said earlier, is the most dominant feature of the whole of the valley. It consists of a large rocky mound and, as we will see a little later, quite a large old Aboriginal midden. At the base of the hill we have here a large field of bracken, which is the major low-level vegetation in many parts of the valley. From this point we enter the track up Nanny Goat Hill. We can see all types of ground-dwelling plants, climbers, creepers. As we walk a little further along the track, we approach the midden, which is an Aboriginal area where many, many years ago the Aboriginals sat and ate their shellfish, which they had collected from the creek down below. At this point, we have the option of continuing along through the midden or on the climb to the top of Nanny Goat Hill. Today we'll climb Nanny Goat Hill first. And this is where the climb really starts. Now you can see immediately the change, much more rocky than down below. You'll see a certain amount of erosion where the water has rushed down from up high. But we're now coming into the area of moss-covered rocks and ground. We come to the first of the native fuchsia. The track gets steeper, and here we are reaching the Sydney red gums, the Angophora. This Banksia cone, you can see, has new seed forming on it. And yet this one, just behind it, has spread its seed, and the seed has been broadcast onto the ground. That seed will not germinate until the day a fire goes through here. You'll notice too, at this point, as we're climbing higher, away from the wet areas, the rocks are becoming far less mossy, and the ground itself is drying out. Right, here we come to our own miniature version of Stanley Chasm. A narrow slot in the rocks, which gives a reasonably easy climb up to the top of Nanny Goat Hill. From the top of the hill we look north towards the city and then around towards Bondi Junction. Below us we see the suburbs of Turrella and Arncliffe. Further around we look south towards Hurstville. And then in the west towards Earlwood. And then continue on around past Undercliff and back towards looking at the city. As we leave the top of Nanny Goat Hill, it's a much easier climb down than the climb up. This Christmas bush is a very good illustration of how native plants will battle to live anywhere. This one is growing in a crack in the rock. A small amount of soil has lodged there, and as you can see, it is quite an old tree, but still it survives. And here we come to a very nice example of the egg and bacon plant, the Dilwinia. As we push our way through a little more of the Kunzia scrub, we come out within a few metres to a much, much clearer area. Right at this point, we come to the bearded heath, which, as you see, is in bud at the moment. And from there, we continue on through the much more open area down on what is now a sandy track, as compared to the heavy rocks that we were walking on only a few moments ago. We emerge to a large clear area and we're back into the moss zones. Down here we have the mossy growth on the soil, and as you see, we are getting into a completely different vegetation area. And as we continue on down, we start to see a lot of new growth, all coming on, all naturally propagated. There's very little weed growth in this area, although that's not to say there is none, because right here we can see another weed, the lantana. We come to the Sydney wattle, the Sydney golden wattle, or Acacia terminalis, another wattle. And we continue down here to the lower track, back to Turrella. Here we are right on the very banks of the creek. On the far side of the creek we have the wetland regeneration project. These are the seeds of the pittosporum. Those little red-orange seeds are very much loved by the birds. Even the honey eaters come in and eat those. And of course they form the basis for all of the natural propagation that is occurring right throughout the valley. We pass here through the clumps of the lomandra, the native grass with its spiky seed pods. This is the coral fern, a fern native to the valley, and as you can see its name is because it looks so much like a branch of coral. And here we have an Aboriginal shelter cave. It has been identified as such by the Aboriginal community. Obviously over many, many years the archaeological significance has been covered up by rock falls such as this, and naturally soil build-ups. Now we've had a look at the Aboriginal shelter cave, perhaps it would be a good time, while we're looking at things Aboriginal, to continue along and have a closer look at the Aboriginal midden. Here we have a shell on the midden, which is shown through the sandy soil such as we have here. At this point I'll show some better examples of the shells which may be found. Here is one almost totally preserved. The age of the shells, well, we know the Aboriginals have not used this midden for over 200 years. So these shells are at least 200 years old. Who knows, they may even be thousands of years old. Now, these shells were collected to show you what can be found. But remember, the midden has a very great meaning to the Aboriginal community. It is almost a sacred site because it's part of their history. So we will return these shells to the hidden places of the midden in respect of the Aboriginals. From the midden, we'll now retrace our steps and return to the creek bank. At this point we get an overview of the bend in the creek. Leaving the bend of the creek, we will now take a walk along the creek bank. This area is very heavily overgrown with weeds, lantana and solanum. The solanum is sometimes called wild tobacco. It is a relative of the potato and the tomato, but I can assure you it is most inedible. But the whole area is not totally covered by weed. As you can see here behind the solanum we have the native mosses, and brown though it may be because of the time of year, the native bracken fern. To your right you can see the creek, bounded with reeds, a few on the side on which you're walking, and large areas of the native reed on the opposite side of the creek. And here we have one of the native birds so common to the area, the spoonbill. These birds come to feed along Wolli Creek. We are starting to approach another bend in the creek, and we can get right down to the creek bank. But a word of warning. This soil is a very, very fine silt. When it becomes wet, it becomes very, very slippery. So approach the creek bank with caution. You could very easily slip and fall into the creek. And I can tell you from experience that creek is deep. It is between 3 and 4 meters deep, in fairly close to the banks. We've now almost returned to our starting point, the bridge. And we can see now a clear view of the large reed beds. These reed beds are the home to many native birds. We hope that the reed beds will move in and ultimately replace the wandering dew. In the background we can see Nanny Goat Hill, which we climbed a little earlier. And here we are, back at our starting point. Thank you for coming along with us for a walk through Wolli Creek Valley. Goodbye.